My last Ride the Cyclone video was generally friendly to people who had not even like heard of the show. It was sort of an introductory video to the musical, but this video 100% should not be seen without having at least heard the soundtrack. But I truly believe if you haven't seen the show, you should hold off watching this video because it will not be the same me just like describing the show to you. So if you haven't seen the show, I recommend holding off on this video, watching the production, and then coming back and watching this. I understand that's slightly absurd, so I will do my best to fill in the gaps where, like, I talk about staging or, like, the visual aspects of this, and feel free to ask any and all questions in the comments below. But this is my long-awaited Ride the Cyclone theories and opinions video. It is currently September 14th. If you know, you know. So I felt it was very fitting that now I had to finally make this video. I also finally got the script. I have been waiting for this script. I ordered it back in February of 2020, and I finally have it. COVID really wanted to keep this from me, but now I have my script to finally check through all my notes, have like a hard copy of like what the concrete lines and moments in the show are. And as somebody who's been a fan of the show since 2018, I have so many theories. And I've waited years for someone to ask me about my theories because I've not had anyone really to talk to this show about because it is still severely underrated. So even though the script that I have for this is 12 pages long, there are more. If you want to hear more theories than this, I'm going to guess hour-plus long video. Let me know. My thoughts on Ride the Cyclone never end. Some of my theories have like good like text and subtextual evidence, and some of them are purely based on vibes. So if you disagree with my theories, very much let me know what you think about the show in the comments and what you think about the characters, because I think that there is just so much good lore around Ride the Cyclone, especially since it's like the middle like piece in a like upcoming trilogy, that there's just so much that you can like piece out of the characters' lives and build like the context and setting around who they were as people that I just think is so interesting to think about and talk about them. So like, if you have thoughts as well, let me know, please. I'm going to generally try to organize my theories like character by character, but as a lot of my theories talk about how characters interact with each other, there's going to be a lot of jumping around, but I'm going to have time codes so that you can generally try to stick on my wavelength of who we're talking about. Cool? Cool. Starting off very generally about the show itself, and about like tertiary characters in the show. Father Louis P. Markus. The choir conductor's name, Markus, is spelled M-R-C-U-S. But when they talk about a Father Markus who's talking to Ricky when his prognosis looks grim to like give him his make-a-wish, they spell it M-R-K-U-S. And I am almost 100% sure that this is just a typo, because when you go to Jane Doe's monologue where they're talking about her and they're like, Father Louis P. Markus died of a heart attack 7 hours after the accident, his name there is also spelled with a K. But I like to believe that there are two Father Marcuses at St. Cassian's, and hijinks can ensue from all the miscommunications of having the Father Markus with a C and Father Markus with a K. The setting of the show is obviously the dilapidated warehouse, but I think that's because the fairground, the wonderful traveling fairground, was sued for all it was worth. In the setting notes, it reads that the warehouse was packed hastily, and in my mind, that 100% reads as a bunch of people who were like, oh my goodness, a bunch of kids died at our fair, we need to stash all this shit away and leave town quickly before we're like sued and arrested. Because of course having 6 teenagers die on a tragic roller coaster accident will be a PR nightmare. They were deemed our 6 saints. Like there's no way that like they wouldn't try and like get justice in some way by holding the fair people accountable, which 100% they should. But as these are people who like are accustomed to like packing up and moving at a moment's notice because they are a traveling fairground, I don't think that they ever were like tried, prosecuted, sued, because I 100% believe that they just threw everything in that warehouse and like skipped town. And Uranium City is like north rural Saskatchewan, so it would not be hard to just like simply go off the grid from there, because Uranium City is already pretty far off the grid. The script says that the action in the musical takes place a year behind the present, and KARNAK exists in the very distant future, telling this story a couple decades after the accident. And the show opens on like a monologue of him introducing himself and talking directly to the audience and then introducing the choir, but the choir doesn't like sort of introduce themselves to the audience in the same way that KARNAK does. Like, they have their monologues where they sort of look out into the audience as like all shows do, but KARNAK like directly addresses the people in the audience, like he knows that they're there, and the kids don't do that. So it makes me believe that KARNAK is actually like, it's him telling this story. Like, the kids don't know that they're like on stage telling a story to people, but KARNAK is aware that there are people in the audience, and he is actually just sort of like puppeting like their souls or something. Like, he's conjured up these children to tell the stories to us, the audience, versus how like in other shows you're just sort of getting like a glimpse into somebody's like actual lives and things that are happening to these kids. This is sort of like a purposeful story that like KARNAK is telling us. So Uranium City is a small town, but it is specifically stated as a highway town, which means to me that like somebody has to have a car, because they have to have a way to like get to the traveling fair, and Noel has to have a way to get to work at the mega mall outside of the city. But they can't all have cars. Yeah, they don't have money. The town is very poor. So it doesn't make sense for all 6 of these teenagers to have their own car. So I think Mischa has a car, Constance is allowed to drive her parents' minivan, but other than that, I don't think that like Ocean, Noel, or Ricky has a car. Ricky, for obvious reasons, but Ocean's parents specifically wanted to live a carbon-free lifestyle, so I feel like they're very anti-car. They would not get Ocean a car for her 16th birthday, and you might think that Noel, being the only person stated to have a job, would have a car. I don't think actually that he has a car. I think that he's 100% focused explicitly on saving his money and moving to France. And I don't think that he's budgeted having a car into this. I think maybe at some point he used to have a car, but it was a really old car that broke down and he no longer has a car. He might sometimes use his mother's car when she's not using it to get to work, but I generally don't think that he has his own car. Now, this is one of my crazier theories, so like stick with me on this. I believe that all the different versions of Ride the Cyclone are all canonical and exist on different timelines. Because as the show has like changed and progressed over the years, a bunch of lines have been like added, taken out, as like most shows do as it's being workshopped. But there is a very small detail that they have changed that doesn't make any sense unless all of these versions are sort of different true versions. It's the fact that the time of the accident has changed. Like, the current printed version says that they got on the roller coaster at 6:17 p.m. and the front axle broke at 6:19, and that is when they died. But in previous versions, it used to be 8:17, and then they died at 8:19. That seems like such a weird, small thing to change that, like, it shouldn't be a thing that you're thinking about unless it's, like, for a reason. Like, the time of the accident does not affect any of the events, like, in the show. So it would be, like, such a weird thing to change unless you were thinking about, like, timelines and different story elements like that, you know? I think the change happened around the 2018 version, which is where they had like a different opening number, a bunch of lines that were different from that version to this printed version that I'll talk about later. Space Age Bachelor Man was a whole different number. So I'm thinking that like the 8:17 version has those all elements from the 2018 version, and that is one true canonical timeline. But then there's also the current version, which happens at 6:17 with the Uranium Suite and the Zolar Space Age Bachelor Man timeline. Because, like, why else would they change the time in which they died? You know? It could be that there are, like, 6 teenagers and they're, like, 17 to 19 years old, but I think that's just, like, a bit of a reach. If you really want to tin hat with me, we can bring in the fact that KARNAK like has control over life and death, and he might have been like dooming them to die when he told them to ride the Cyclone, and there was no way that they could like escape it. No matter like what time it was when they rode the Cyclone, they were going to die. Even Ghostlight Productions, the production company that put out the Ride the Cyclone album, states in the about section of it that the accident happened at 8:17. Is that because the album version has songs from the previous timeline, like Be Safe and Be Good? Perhaps. All fun things to theorize about. Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, bonus opinion, really quick. When I was reading through the script, I learned some of the actual lyrics of the song. I always thought that they were singing in the opening number, Uranium are dead and I will never leave this town alive. Turns out it's uranium, our dead in dive, will, or we, apostrophe LL, never leave this town alive. Maybe it's just because I don't know what dead in dive means, but I don't love that line. I think actually the line should be uranium, our dead end, I will never leave this town alive. No, we will never leave this town at all. Because I think that line is better. But also, I've never written a show. Who am I to judge? Now, the big open-ended question, what happens at the end of the show? There's the moment when KARNAK dies, and they're all just sort of like, oh, he's dead, and he's the power that's keeping us here, so we're all dead too, but then they're not, so like, what's happening? I think, yes, they're dead, no, they're not dead. It goes back to my multiple timelines theory. I think that in the 2018 version, because they had Waiting for the Drop as the opening number, in that number, you can watch it on YouTube, they start, the first time that you see them on stage, they're all in like their roller coaster formations with Ricky in the back, Ocean and Constance in the front, and then Mischa and Noel in the middle. And then at the end of the show, as they're going like around and back in the curtain, like as they're singing their final lines, they go back into roller coaster formation, and then you hear Jane Doe sing, I know this dream of life is never ending, it goes around and around and around again. But that's also the first line at the beginning of the show. That's the first like moment that you see even before KARNAK does his whole monologue. So I think for the 2018 version, that sort of visual and auditory parallel tells me that they're sort of like stuck in a time loop, because they go back and sort of like reset to the very beginning of the show before like the curtains close at the end, which makes me believe that they're just sort of resetting to do this 90-minute loop again. Also, the line that Jane Doe literally sings is, I know this dream of life is never ending. It goes round and round and round again. Does that not scream, we are stuck in a time loop? Very sad. But in the current version, they don't have that opening number. So I believe that when Jane Doe's actually singing that and they go back into roller coaster formation, that's sort of her just like leading them like off into the afterlife, into peace. Which I think is like a lot nicer, because that was KARNAK's sort of whole point of this, was to like put these teenagers to rest. And I think in this current version, he finally gets to do that. But let's talk about KARNAK now. When Ocean asks, why can you only bring one of us to life, why not all of us? KARNAK says, sadly, I've only ever possessed the power to bring one back to life. And like, what does that mean? There has to be some sort of like magic in that, right? So I think it's sort of like a homeostasis thing where KARNAK could not bring somebody back to life until he died. Where like whatever was giving him life and power, he was able to sort of like move on to somebody else, but only when he died, because otherwise why would he wait like decades after the accident to like bring these kids back? And he knew exactly when he was going to die. He knew exactly how much time it was going to take, and KARNAK always feels like he is like trying to push the plot along. When Ocean's talking too much, he immediately like tries to shut her down and cut her off, because he knows that they only have so much time until he dies and he has to like give his life over to Jane. But almost like immediately after Jane goes past the curtain, they sing It's Not a Game, and then KARNAK has his countdown, his 10-second countdown, and then he dies. And I think that timing is a bit too close together for them to like literally not be connected. But also, we have this casual line that he just sort of drops in the beginning of his monologue where he's like, I was designed to predict the exact cause, time, and place of someone's death. What? Excuse me, sir, what? And nobody just sort of like questions that. Why? Where does that power come from? How do you do that? I want a prequel about KARNAK's life and like the people who designed him, because that's just so casually said. Like, oh yeah, sure, you can do that. What, sir? And this is like never really brought up or explained or mentioned again, so I think this is too big of like a mystery to try and theorize like the reasons behind it. But I'm gonna try anyways. I think that, again, there has to be some sort of magic involved, some sort of transfer of, like, the power of life and death, which is already very wild and powerful. I think that something went wrong, though, because you don't just, like, make a fortune teller with the power to bring somebody back to life and then just sell it to a traveling fairground if everything's all fine with it, you know? I definitely feel like it has that, like, horror movie aspect where, like, this thing got way too powerful and I need to just sort of get rid of it. I need to try to suppress its power by setting it to family fun novelty mode and getting it out of my life. I think, again, going back to the sort of dooming them to death thing, is that it's less so a prediction and more so like a condemnation, where like he will say like a place, time, cause, and then it sort of has to happen that way because of his power. Maybe it didn't start out that way. Maybe it really was just sort of predictions. But I think it's a lot easier to call them predictions when they always come true because he's sort of making them come true. But again, there's truly not enough information in the show about this to know. Another thing that sort of like leads me to this idea that he just like is low-key kind of evil is the fact that he was left plugged in. He's in like a dilapidated warehouse, but they left him plugged into the wall. I think it's sort of like a Five Nights at Freddy's sort of thing where like if you turn them off, it's a lot worse for you than if you just sort of leave them on and let them be like low-key evil, because once you turn them on after leaving them off for a while, it's gonna be like absolute hell. One thing that you gotta sort of double back and think about is the fact that this is sort of like a pre-planned show. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, there's a script. Of course it's pre-planned, but like bigger than that, the events in the story, like in universe, are all sort of pre-planned. Even though all these kids think that they're like in an actual competition, there was never any competition to begin with, because KARNAK can tell the future. He knows everything that's already going to happen in the show, and he does certain things with this in mind. Like, he makes Ocean go first, so that she has the longest amount of time in the show to sort of realize what she's done. He changes the rules so that it's a democratic vote from each and every member of the choir to play into Ocean's value of democracy. He puts Ocean on the spot right at the end of the show to have her make the final vote, which just sort of goes against all the rules he originally stated, in order to see if Ocean has learned her lesson from this. He does this so that Ocean can grow throughout the story. Jane wins in the end, but this whole thing was sort of orchestrated for Ocean. Like, KARNAK didn't care who like won the game and who came back. As we see throughout the show, he is able to like control their speech, control their movement, so he could have like pushed anybody past the curtain to the other side that he wanted. But he wanted Ocean to realize what he's done, because all of this wasn't actually to bring somebody back to life, it was to put these children to rest. Because obviously, out of all of the kids, Ocean was the most upset by this. Like, everybody sings their songs about like, oh, I wish my life was a little bit different, but like I'm generally okay with the fact that I died. I'm at peace with it. But I think Ocean was sort of like that restless soul. I think Ocean was really the one who was like the most upset about having died, because she was like working towards something. I was building a life. So I think KARNAK could have like sensed that with his, once again, magical powers. And he orchestrated this whole thing so that Ocean can finally like move on. Like, KARNAK literally says at the beginning, the one who wants to win it the most shall redeem the loser in order to complete the whole. And then Ocean realizes this at the end and is like, you knew all along I couldn't do it, I couldn't choose myself. Because KARNAK knew the whole purpose behind this was to have her grow, and that she could never go through with it, because he orchestrated this whole thing for Ocean. Like, we have to realize there are no real, like, rules in this game. Like, in one of the previous versions of there was like a line that was cut that I'll get to later about how he just sort of brings up points in the middle that have nothing to do with anything, and Ocean's just like, you see, he's just sort of messing with me now, because he is. Like, at the beginning of the show, Ocean just keeps trying to like dig into what's going on and asking questions, and just like keeps talking, and then in order to like shut that down, KARNAK is like, you have used up the group's 3 questions for this evening. There's never a limit on questions. He just sort of makes that up so that Ocean has to keep going along with this game. Like most things in life, it was ultimately about Ocean, and it proves once again that even in competition against yourself, you can still walk away a loser. But moving right along to one Richard Potts, my big overarching theory for Ricky is that Ricky is trans. I used to think that he was a trans man, because when Mischa was like, that's emasculating, after he does his catchphrase, Ricky's like, story of my life, brother, and then the whole like situation around the name Savannah, which I'll get to later, it was just very sus. But if you look up the definition of emasculation, it's literally like medically meaning the removal of external male sex organs, which sounds like bottom surgery to me, dude. So I wholeheartedly believe that Ricky is a trans woman, at the very least trans femme. But the core of this theory is ultimately the moment when he's talking to Jane about the name Savannah, because that whole exchange is like weird. If you don't know, it's after a new birthday song where a bunch of the characters are having sort of like their duo scenes, and Ricky's sitting down playing, I don't think it's called an accordion because it's like a piano that's laying down, but it also has sort of like the squeeze key part of the accordion. I don't know what it's called. But Jane comes and sits down next to him, and she's like, how do we know it's my birthday? And Ricky's like, how do we know it's not your birthday? People have names on pretend birthdays too. You can call yourself Savannah. What's a Savannah? Savannah's a special name I was saving up, but you can have it because everything I've been saving has to go. I like Savannah. You can have her. He doesn't say it. He doesn't say you can have it like a name. He says her. He already thinks of Savannah as a person. And I've talked to other people about this, and they believe he's like saving this name for like a child, but there's literally nothing in the story to lead you to believe that he wants children. He doesn't mention it like once about how he's like, oh, I never got to have a family, blah, 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 blah. Like, his whole song is just about wanting to fuck. There's nothing that says that he wants the next step of having a child. Also, he's like 17. I think it's very weird to just sort of assume that because he's saving this name, it's for this child that he was wishing for at 17. Especially since, let's all be honest, he didn't think he was gonna live that much longer. He already had his Make-A-Wish. They said that his prognosis looked grim. He did not think of like living long enough to like come up with hypothetical names for his hypothetical children. So I think Savannah is his chosen name, and he is trans. But I will also accept the headcanon that he is trans-masked, because I think that there's good evidence for either side of the thing. And you might be thinking, Sam, they show his baby photos in, like, the bumper. Why didn't that come up before? And I think it's because, as KARNAK says in, I think, the 2018 version, like, right before the cut in Waiting for the Drop, I'm going to show you how, not how they were perceived to be, but what they dreamt they were. So obviously, if he's trans, in his bumper, his baby photos will look how he dreamt that he looked. And Space Age Bachelor Man really feels like performing masculinity, doesn't it? It's giving very much Dean Winchester. There's just something there that's not 100% secure. Does that make sense? I don't know. I think that it's very important that him being a disabled character is able to also be seen as like sexy and desirable, and I don't want to take away from that, but like, these are just the thoughts in my head. The Savannah conversation just sort of threw me off. Anyways, let's talk about the lore around Space Age Bachelor Man, because it is wild. These cat humans from the planet Zolar need this 17-year-old boy to go to their distant galaxy and fuck their daughters because it is unclear. They say he has a magic seed, but like, what the fuck does that mean? Do they need him to help repopulate their cat planet because they're dying off in the war against Count Dogulus? Like, it's very unclear. But then after, they have this child sleep with their cat daughters. They ask him his advice on nuclear war, which is insane. It's only then that Ricky's like, hey, why are you asking me? I'm a lover, not a fighter. And like, he has to like educate them on like love and pacifism, and like, we love the message, very sweet, but like, Richard, they are at war, we're a bit past niceties, okay? But then he says that he saves the whole galaxy with love from the heart, and again, so nice, could only come from the sweetest, most imaginative boy in town. But like, seriously, Ricky? Fucking cat women are, really? Not to mention that the 2018 version has a completely different song with a completely different storyline. In the 2018 version, he goes to the planet Kataris, not Zolar, two different planets, and he has to stop the Queen Nefertiti Vasquez. Don't actually know how to pronounce it because I've never seen it written. Because she's trying to like destroy the world because Earth is really disrespectful to cats because we keep putting them in memes, and he has to stop her with his legendary mega super dance, but then he also has sex with the cat queen. There's also a Dalek in this number. It's very weird, a lot weirder than the current version, and unlike my two different timelines theory, I think that these are both like canonically true in Ricky's head. Like, I feel like these are both things that both Rickys from either timeline have like dreamt and believed, but in the different timelines he tells these different stories. But they're both like true and technically exist in his mind in both like timeline versions. Does that make sense? All I know is that Ricky is not only a furry, but also a monster fucker. Moving on. This song could go really south really quick, by the way, if you don't have the right actor playing him, because the idea of a sort of like reclusive comic book nerd whose only real dream is to have like hot women fuck him is sort of synonymous with like neckbeard fedora incel types. And I've seen non-professional versions of Ride the Cyclone where the actor playing Ricky just did not fully embody that like belief of him being like a sex god. And the vibe of the song was just really creepy and weird. Thankfully, Scott Redmond gives you the full fantasy. And you're able to 100% believe it, but like the line can be crossed and it is dangerous. Into lighter theories, Ricky has 14 cats. I like to believe that they are all named after comic book characters. Like there's a little Loki, there's a Thor, maybe a Wanda, a Storm. It's all very cute. Ricky 100% would also be a fan of Dimension 20. He cried watching A Crown of Candy and is very mad that he died before he could see season 3 of Fantasy High. Y'all can fight me on that. His favorite character is Riz for obvious reasons. He loves Riz. Riz is just a little weird. A little goofy dude. Or maybe Fabian? Actually, his favorite character is Fabian. Never mind. Also, Ricky can read. Ocean says in her song What the World Needs that Ricky's never gonna read, but like we see in his monologue bumper moment that he pens a letter to Father Markus for his Make-A-Wish. So he can read and write. So I'm just gonna chalk that up to Ocean once again being in the moment. But like, in my mind, if he can write, then like, I find it odd that he doesn't know sign language. I think it's probably just because he doesn't have like the proper hand dexterity to fully be able to like sign all the time, and that's why he has that weird pseudo sign language with his parents. But if he can write, he in theory can also sign. I don't know much about disabilities though, and they try to keep his like specific one pretty open-ended, so I don't really know like what it is. They mentioned in his old monologue in the 2018 version that like no doctor can comprehend his like degenerative disease. And they say it's rare, so maybe there's no real life equivalent to like what it is. We know it like affects the muscles. He lost his speech sometime before the age of 6, and around that time was not able to like walk safely on his own, so that's why he has crutches. But after that, it's really not explained, other than the fact that like he lived that way until he was about 16, and then his prognosis looked grim. But I do think that that moment is a good piece of evidence to the fact that like Ocean, which we already sort of know, that Ocean was never really attentive to other people outside of her own life, that like she just sort of assumed that Ricky couldn't read, even though he can. But moving right along to one Jane Doe, aka Penny Lamb. Even though I believe that Penny Lamb and Jane Doe are two different people because Jane doesn't have any of like Penny's memories, I do believe that there is like obviously some essence of Penny in Jane, and you can see that in her catchphrase. What you would know if you've read the prequel to Ride the Cyclone, which I recommend everybody does, Legoland by Jacob Richmond, Penny was really into animal conservation, so her catchphrase being about, when a lioness has children, she stops making love to the lion. The lion gets jealous, sometimes so jealous he eats the children. You think this might upset the lioness? Far from it. They make love again like the children never existed. I find that idea terrifying. That moment is clearly a thing that Penny would know as somebody interested in animal conservation. It's not just like some weird thing that she says to freak everybody out. It's like a moment of Penny shining through Jane. But what I want to know is, did she actually join the choir at the last minute, like people have rumored? I lean towards no, because nobody in the choir seems to like know who she is. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. She does show like an interest in music. If you read Legoland, she's really into Johnny Moon, and music seems to be like sort of a big thing in her life. But I think it was more so like a wrong place, wrong time scenario. I think she might have carpooled like with the kids outside of Uranium City to go to the fair, and had just sort of like gotten on the roller coaster with them. I like to believe that she was sitting next to Ricky because they had that cute little moment in the end. But the real question is, what happened to Ezra? Again, go read Legoland. It is the prequel, but Ezra is Penny's younger brother. They both get shipped off to St. Cassian when their parents get, like, arrested for, like, growing marijuana in, like, a commune. But Ezra's, like, never mentioned in the story. I know that there used to be, like, other characters in the choir in previous versions that were, like, cut out and pushed into other characters. And I think that might have happened to Ezra, because Ezra's thing is that he was really into, like, German nihilism, and we know that Noel is really nihilistic, so maybe he got that aspect from Ezra's character. But, like, was Ezra there? Did he watch his sister get decapitated? Like, I find it so odd that her body was never identified, because, like, they said that she was in a St. Cassian uniform. If you could identify all the other kids that died in the roller coaster accident, you could assumedly just go to St. Cassian and be like, are you missing a child? And they would be like, oh yes, we are. Ezra especially should have been able to, like, figure out that his sister was missing. I think the only way that, like, she couldn't actually be identified was if there was some weird legal red tape where, like, Jane says in her, like, little moment that, like, no parents came, so they never learned my name. So maybe, like, because they're, like, wardens of the state, I think they're, like, under control of, like, a social worker. So maybe because their actual, like, parents couldn't come and identify the body, she was just sort of left unidentified. I don't know how the legal system works in Canada. It seems like a minor plot hole, so I'm just gonna move on from that. But I said actually unidentified because I think that, like, in-universe Penny's body was identified, because we have to understand that, like, KARNAK is the person telling us all of this information, and you have to think, well, how does KARNAK know these things about Jane if he never read her fortune? And I think it's because he's gathered all of this information from the fortunes that he's told other people. Like, we know from his monologue that he is able to gather people's hopes, thoughts, and dreams when he tells somebody their fortune. So they said that this accident was, like, a big national story. So it makes sense that, like, everybody, especially in Uranium City, would know that, like, this happened and that these children died and that there was one unidentified body. So I think that KARNAK, like, for maybe a couple hours, a couple days, maybe even after the accident, before they had to shut everything down, was telling a few more fortunes and was able to gather from the thoughts of those people who had read the story, or even from the people who, like, put him away in the warehouse, that there were 5 children who were identified in one unidentified body. And this would explain how to KARNAK she was never identified, because the people who had read the news stories and didn't actually know her and were passing the information unknowingly to KARNAK did not actually know her or know that she was identified, because it would make sense that if they did end up identifying her, that they wouldn't want to put that in the press, because she was a warden of the state. Her parents had just had this giant, like, drug operation, and now they're in prison. So it would be a very bad look if, like, the people who had found out that that was Penny Lamb went back to the news sources and were like, yeah, so one of these kids that you just deified for the whole country is actually the child of a giant criminal. Fun fact. So I think that just the information of who she was never got out to the public. So the public who told this information unknowingly to KARNAK weren't able to tell him that she was identified. Because we know that KARNAK can't just, like, tell the future, because when Ocean asks, what happens in 5 minutes? KARNAK says, my death, and after that I'm not entirely sure. So I think that all of his knowledge of, like, the future and what's to come just sort of comes from his interactions with other people. So if those people don't know, then KARNAK's not going to be able to know, if that makes sense. He's just sort of getting, like, secondhand information. Like, he only knows the lives of the specific people that he's told fortunes to. He doesn't know, like, the overarching, like, arc of human history. So it makes sense that he only has, like, an incomplete view of Penny's life, as he hasn't read her fortune specifically. But now let's move on to talking about Ocean. And here is where I come out as an Ocean O'Connell Rosenberg apologist, because I believe she didn't do anything wrong. Is that because I'm painfully similar to her? Perhaps. But she made a very compelling argument, and I think more people need to, like, stop and consider that. All the other kids are trying to argue with ethos. They're trying to be like, oh, my life was so sad. Please feel bad for me. That's so sad that I died. Yes. But Ocean is making a very logical argument. She is arguing with pathos. She is like, I should be brought back to life because I'm the best for this, and this reason. Like, she is arguing that if she is brought back, she will bring the most into society. And like, is she wrong? In my opinion, she's not wrong. Like, she was a go-getter. She was the strongest out of their group. Like, everybody else was like, oh no, I wish I had lived a better or different life. But Ocean was like living a good life. She was doing everything that she wanted to do. She was class president. She had straight A's. She was on student council. Like, she was the most objectively successful person. And as we see from Penny's montage at the end, you don't get brought back with all the memories of what happened in the warehouse. Like, you don't come back with all the character development. So anybody brought back is brought back, as we see with Penny, as a baby. So it's not like any of these people who are like, damn, I wish I didn't waste my life, wouldn't continue to waste their life, you know? Anybody brought back wouldn't have known not to waste their life or like what mistakes they were going to make. And Ocean was the only person who wouldn't have wasted her second chance because she wasn't wasting her first chance. But I get that argument doesn't work for a lot of people. A lot of people still really hate her, which always really surprised me because I loved Ocean from the beginning. And I think in order to sort of curve this dislike of Ocean, they cut a lot of her lines. In the 2018 version that I watched, she was a lot meaner. She had a lot more rude comments that I think that they cut to just sort of make her more likable. But I think that she needs to be bitchy. I think that you really need to get a sense of like how sort of like cruel and like rude she was to other people. Unintentionally, I might add. I will get to that later. I don't think that she like is malicious in any way, but I think it sort of drives home the point of like who she was in life for her to like just sort of offhandedly say all these things. I think for a lot of people it didn't work because they were like, oh, there's no way that she could like grow as a person so much in this short amount of time. But I think, you know, death does crazy things to people, so I think it's not out of the realm of possibility. But that being said, here is an incomplete list of some of the moments that were cut that make me really sad. Not only because I like to see Ocean being a bitch, but because the show is short enough, stop cutting moments. After the opening number, there was a moment in which the choir's all sort of talking to each other, and Ocean's like, oh, I know what happened. Mischa slipped us drugs. If I had the drug, I would not share them with you. And Noel's like, oh my god, Ocean, you don't sing flat anymore. I don't sing flat, Noel. That's true. Sometimes you sing sharp. And then Ocean's like, this is not the time to be discussing the lead singer of the choir's pitch. Lead singer of the choir. And that helps establish the idea that she just already thinks that she's like better than everybody. There's the moment after improv scenario number 76 in which Constance is like laughing and she's like, you're mad. And then Ocean has this line where she's like, I'm never mad at you. I'm just always disappointed. And then there's this great moment between Mischa and Noel that is cut that makes me so angry because it's the basis of one of my core Noel theories that we will get to later, where after the end of Talia, KARNAK says, why all the long faces? Would you like to know what happened if Mischa ever met his love? And Mischa's like, yes, desperately. And then Noel immediately cuts him off and is like, no, you don't want to do that. You have a longing, an ideal, better to leave it that way. And Mischa is still trying to fight back, being like, no, but I want to know. But then Ocean cuts in, and she's like, I think what Noel's trying to say here, in an extremely confusing manner, is that love conquers all. And then Noel's like, yes, Ocean, that's precisely what I'm saying. Love conquers all. And then right after that, there's this whole section that's cut where Ocean says, cut down in our youth, we all died virgins. And then KARNAK goes, Constance. And then Constance tries to deflect from that. And then she goes, Ocean, why aren't you talking right now? It's weird. And in the current version, Ocean goes, I do not talk all the time. Look at me, empathizing with all of you right now. But in the old version, she used to say, it is kind of weird, truthfully. You know, I have a saying. I'm just a small town girl with a pep in her step, and a song in her heart. And that song is a medley. And then KARNAK like freeze frames them and is like, as Ocean talks and talks, Virgil the rat chews and chews. Buzz, buzz. Let's speed her up a bit. And then they unfreeze and Ocean goes, and that's why I believe not everybody deserves a library card. Or something like that. This is all from memory. I haven't seen this version in like 3 years. And then she says, and you should all vote for me. And then Noel goes, I only know one thing for certain. I would never vote for you. And she goes, why? And he says, you have no redeeming qualities. Even your best friend completely hates you. And Constance goes, no, I don't. Not completely. Hilarious. And then Mischa says, I will vote for Noel Gruber. The world needs more poets. And then Noel goes, and I'll vote for you. And then Ocean says, and that's why you both sucked at math. What about unanimous vote is eluding you two geniuses? If you vote for each other, oh no, we're not going anywhere until I know exactly who everyone is voting for. And then KARNAK goes, 10 points from Ocean O'Connell Rosenberg. And then Ocean goes, points? Points? Since when did points come into this? How did I lose 10 freaking points for being a Spielverderber? What the heck is that? Spielverderber is the German word meaning party spoiler. But, given German history, being a party spoiler may actually be a good thing. Ding ding ding! 10 points to Ocean O'Connell Rosenberg. And then she goes, you see he's just messing with me now? You think I don't understand what this is all for? Or something like that. We're all star farts, all of this is just random, we're all just accidents. And then Ricky goes, speak for yourself, I'm no accident. And then she says, Richard, Ricky, I'm just gonna say what everyone here is thinking. What are we talking? 2, maybe 3 years? Oh shit! What? It's just math. I'm just talking math. And then Ricky goes, I have to go back. And Ocean's like, for what reason? And then Ricky's like, for the only reason anyone here should care about, to stop the earth from certain destruction. Bum bum bum, cause I'm a swingin'. And that's the intro to his song. That whole section is cut. That is not in the show anymore. And I think it's because Ocean just comes across very badly in it, which I get that, like, in theory, at that point in the show, she should be, like, growing and not being as bitchy, but again, I don't want anything cut from Ride the Cyclone, and I'm fine with Ocean being a bad person. But one moment that I think that they should not have cut is at the end of the show when, KARNAK puts her on the spot and is like, you have the final vote, you have to go through the curtain, and Ocean's like, you knew all along I couldn't do it. What? Choose myself. And she says, it shouldn't be me. I made no attempt to get to know any of you in life. And then she does her, like, written monologue. That line was just so good. That line was so good that she, like, realizes that, like, she thinks that she's a good person and that she's done all these good things, but she doesn't actually know any of these people, so much so that she didn't know that Ricky could read. I understand why they would cut all those other moments, but I think that this moment is like a pure stated moment of character development that they should have kept in. But that's just a collection of some of the lines that were cut that I desperately miss. I know that one of the theaters that they've done this at, I know that ACT has recorded some of it. I bet that they have a whole pro shot of it, and I think that they should just put it on a pay-per-view. One day, maybe on Moment House. I just want to be able to see the old version. Because it's not like we can ever see that version ever again, because the script is completely different now. So, like, give us the version. I want a pro shot of Ride the Cyclone 2022. But back to Ocean. I think Ocean's family were like social outcasts in Uranium, because Uranium, as we all know, is sort of like a capitalistic town. They were like thriving and booming, and then like the mines closed. And I think you sort of like have to be when your town is like dying, because the town used to be like great and lively with all the mines and all the money coming in, but now everybody's just sort of like working dead-end jobs and just trying to, you know, feed their families. So I think like it's not necessarily a bad thing that it's capitalistic and everybody sort of has money on their mind, they just sort of have to. But like as Ocean's family specifically are like Marxist, which we stan, and came to live like a carbon-free lifestyle, it would make sense that like they sort of stick out versus everybody else in Uranium. So I think that in that way, Ocean tried to sort of like defy everything that her parents were in order to fit in, and like it worked, because as we know, she has been like student council president for 2 years. That is like a voted elected position. Even if people didn't necessarily like her, she had enough like leadership and like academic quality to have her be voted into student council. And we all know the number one way out of a dead-end town with like no prospects is academics. She has straight A's and she is like on the grind 24/7, working as hard as she can to like make herself like a desirable college applicant. She's trying to get out of Uranium, and isn't that what everybody else is trying to do? Like, yes, she can come across a bit rude and a bit brash sometimes, but I think that she's just trying her best. Look, I'm not saying that she's perfect, but I do think that she's a lot better person than people give her credit for, and I just love her a lot. Like, as she said, she was working towards something. She was building a life. And, like, not to diminish the other characters, not to be an ocean and, like, put down the other characters, but, like, who was working with that same level of, like, diligence and thoughtfulness that she was? Maybe Noel? But that's it. Like, she is the epitome of gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Also, Ocean not understanding social cues and coming off rude when she does not mean to? Maybe? Again, I might be projecting, but it seems very clear in her character. Like she says in her monologue, I've seen enough reality TV to get what you want me to do here, which tells me that she bases a lot of her social interactions off of like what she's seen in reality TV, which is a horrible guide because those people are awful. And when she's talking to Constance, I think she really means it when she says that she envies her ability to do nothing, because I think once again Ocean based a lot of her self-worth on her accomplishments and what she was able to like do and achieve. So when she sees Constance, who's able to just sort of like exist and be happy with her like seemingly like undesirable life of just sort of working, living, and dying in uranium, I think Ocean is being very truthful when she says that she envies that. So like even though that conversation seems really rude and backhanded, I think she like genuinely means that, and it's coming from a place of love, because like when she says that Constance is her best friend, I think she truly means that. I think that she loves Constance and would never want to like purposefully hurt her feelings. It's just that like when she thinks something, she says it, and she doesn't really like realize that like it hurts other people's feelings. But like also, if she was like as big of a bitch as other people like think that she is, she would be saying these things on purpose. Like she would be saying them in order to like push herself up and like make other people feel bad, because like even in her song, when she does not realize that like she needs to be like winning their favor or whatever, she says the line, do we really need another organ donor? Maybe that was a little harsh. Love you. To Constance, because she doesn't want to be rude. Like she said, she was caught in the moment. And I think that, is that a true thought that she had? Yeah, probably. But did she want to be mean when she said that? No. And I think that like intent versus impact is a thing that we have to think about with Ocean's character. Like I don't think that Ocean is a bad person. I think that if she wanted to be mean and put other people down, she wouldn't keep like apologizing after she says all these things. I think she's just like a little bit blunt and just sort of says what's on her mind and like is a bit outspoken. And I think if she was like a man, nobody would have an issue with this. So, and I think KARNAK even knows this at the beginning, and we know that he sort of knows these characters better than anybody, because when he reads their fortune, he's able to read their hopes, thoughts, and dreams, and he knows from the beginning that Ocean would never choose herself. Is she really that bad of a person if she knew, even before all of this character development, that like Jane was the person who deserved to go back? Some more evidence that Ocean's actually a good person, real quick. Right after she finds out only one person can be brought back to life, she immediately says, why only one of us, why not all of us? Thinking about other people. She writes the new birthday song so that Jane can feel like loved and included. She threw that like quick little birthday party for her. A moment I don't think enough people appreciate is when she's talking about their improv duo. Unlock the power of the positive. You pop. And then Constance is like, we get a little crazy sometimes. And then Ocean's like, Constance Eleanor Blackwood, you know I find the word crazy offensive. And like, it's played off for laughs of her being like a bit type A, a bit uptight, but like, stigmatizing mental illness isn't cute. We love eliminating those words from our vocabulary. I try not to like flippantly use those words in my conversation, because like, you don't need to. It's good to not try to stigmatize mental illness. And we love that for Ocean. Again, I don't think she's perfect, but I think more people just need to like respect and understand her for the girl boss that she was. Okay? Moving on though, to her rival, Noel. My biggest theory that I wholeheartedly believe is that Talia is not real. It's just Noel catfishing Mischa. Do I want this to be true? No, of course not. Of course I want Talia to be real so that Mischa can be happy and in love. But the evidence just tells me otherwise. Again, referencing that whole section that was cut. At the end of Talia, KARNAK is like, would you like to know what happened if you ever meet your love? And Mischa says, yes, desperately. And Noel immediately cuts him off and is like, no, you don't want to do that. And like, it just seems a bit suspicious. I think it's because Noel knew that Talia wasn't real and he did not want to be like exposed for his lie. Also, his ultimate dream man is someone who will basically abuse him, drive him to drink, and the suitor in his fantasy just so happens to be the dark and mysterious European bad boy with an alcohol addiction. I'm sorry, there are just too many coincidences there. Also, not to read too much into actors' acting choices, but at the beginning of the show, when KARNAK is like starting up and he's like, "You've inserted 2 loonies, KARNAK looks into the future," all the kids get very startled because it's loud and like sudden, and then they all sort of jump together, and in that moment, Noel like clings on to Mischa. And then Misha's like, "Whoa, get off me, dude." And Noel's like, and he looks really bashful. And I'm just like, there's something there. And you might be thinking, but Sam, Mischa says that they spoke together in his native language. But I think in the age of Google Translate, Noel, who's already into like weird indie European films, couldn't like learn Ukrainian. Or at least know enough Ukrainian or figure out enough Ukrainian to like fool Mischa. And as I'm pretty sure, Mischa meets online Talia after he moves to Canada, because he's never met her, that like the timeline makes perfect sense. Anyways, what do y'all think's in the Noel Gruber Hungry Hombre meal? I think it's a hard shell taco, a soft shell taco, a 5-layer burrito, and the cinnamon twists. I think that Noel used to pretend the cinnamon twists were cigarettes on his shift, and when he died, one of his coworkers mentioned that to his boss, and they put them in the meal. I think the meal was only available at that one franchise location, and corporate never approved it. Okay, I highly recommend that you all watch the Meet the Character series that the Alliance Theater did for all the kids in the choir, because it gives such wonderful backstory, like the fact that Noel's father left their family, and to cope, his mother started taking aerobics classes at the mall. Like, what an incredible little detail. Please tell me more. But like, why did his father leave? I would love to know. Is it because there was no money left in the town? Is that why in the opening number Noel sings, "The smart ones all packed up and went"? Is he referring to his father? Why did his mother stay if his father was leaving? Why didn't they take the whole family out of Uranium City? Were there bigger issues in their marriage? Maybe his mom is like the Blackwoods, who's okay doing her working, living, and dying there, and his father was not? His father's never mentioned in the show, so we may never know. Also, I think Noel would have loved Ayesha Erotica. I think, listen to any Ayesha Erotica song and tell me that doesn't scream Monique Chabot. I think he would also love Doja Cat, but I think specifically when he is embodying his Monique Chabot fantasy, he puts on Ayesha Erotica. But now it's time for the Ukrainian bad boy, Mischa Baczynski, my favorite character. Mischa is the one who I think personally deserves to be brought back, because even though I made that very strong argument for Ocean, I think I get it. We don't like Ocean. That's fine. I love her, but like, I get it. But I think out of all of the characters, Mischa was the one who had the smartest, he was the smartest person with the most empathy in him, you know? Like, Ocean, of course, is I think objectively the most successful and the smartest, but I think Mischa is also just as smart, but also has that sort of empathy that you like want to root for. Because another thing that was cut, is that Mischa is like canonically a polyglot. There is the moment that I talked about before where Ocean's like, "Love conquers all," and then Mischa like really takes to that, and he's like, "Wow, that's so poignant. Love conquers all," and he like starts like weeping, and like he like hugs Noel in that moment. And then when they all have their asides, where like Jane and Ricky have that moment, Constance and Ocean also have a moment, but Mischa and Noel have this really cute moment. And because that previous section was cut, these lines were also cut, but there's this moment where Mischa's like, "Oh, love conquers all. How can you like embody my life with such a simple phrase?" And Noel's like, "It's just a cliche, like a really popular cliche." And Mischa's like, "Dude, I speak Ukrainian, Russian, English. I know what a cliche is." And like, I get why it was cut, but it just makes me so sad because I love Mischa and I want Mischa to have more lines and more moments. But like, he is canonically a polyglot. He can speak at least 3 languages, but the way that he said it makes me think he can speak more, because he said Ukrainian, Russian, English, and then sort of trailed off. He doesn't say "and English." So he could know more than 3 languages, which like is obviously a sign of intelligence. And he is like really poetic in his like monologue to Talia, where he says, you know, "Let rivers run wild or let them be damned." absolutely fucking incredible, bro. Oh my god, that line hits so hard. He's like a writer. I think he's really good at like language arts, but like Ocean said that he's just like not a STEM kid. He's not good at math, he's not good at the sciences, but I think like English and stuff, that's his shit. And I think Mischa is like very smart. I think that he just has like that like stereotypical like I don't care about anything, I'm too good for this school moment, because he's like lashing out because he had to be ripped from the only home that he knew. We'll get to that later. But I think like it's just the classic idea of like he is very smart, he just does not apply himself because he does not want to be here. He doesn't want to be in this school. He doesn't want to be in Canada. But I think he's very smart. He knows at least 3 languages. He's a really good writer. He's saving up money, which means he has a job. I think that like Mischa would have been like the overall like best person to have gone through. Not saying that Jane didn't deserve it, but I as a Mischa Baczynski I love Mischa Baczynski. I think he is my choice. If like the people in the audience got to vote, he would have gotten my vote because I love Mischa and he's the best, most well-rounded character in my mind. When do y'all think that Mischa got adopted? I like to think it was sometime in the middle of their junior year, so like less than a year before the accident happens, because Ocean talks about how Noel and Mischa were bad at math, which implies that they have all had class together at some point, so it couldn't have been like in the summer. But that sort of like rage and like pain he has about his mother still feels really fresh, so I don't think it's been that long. But let me know what y'all think. Okay, now we're gonna get like a deep dive analysis into Mischa and his character, because like there is so much there, but he has so little moments, and I love Mischa, as I've said, but there's just so much to be said about his character, and I don't think enough people talk about him, so let's just get into that. Like, Mischa is obviously not a one-dimensional character. His whole thing is sort of like breaking down that stereotype of like hyper-masculine, almost like toxically masculine men, but I truly do not think his character is talked about enough because he is so complex. But let's start with his mother, because she only gets 2 lines of description, but it just says so much. It starts by saying that Mischa was conceived in a little town outside of Odessa in the Ukraine by a factory worker named Tamara. Already, that says so fucking much, because conceived, not like born in, raised in, is from, like, what does that mean? Like, was Tamara on some sort of fun trip and like a one-night stand turned into like Mischa? Because we never hear about his father, and assumedly if she has to give him up for adoption and like ship him across the ocean to Canada, that there was no like other family or a father that he could have stayed with. And that's already wild. But then they say that she's a factory worker who then became part of the cleanup crew in Chernobyl. And I don't know how much you know about the Chernobyl accident, but they didn't just like hire anybody to clean up all that toxic waste, because you need like professional experience and like knowledge in order to do it safely. So these weren't just like random people. These were like trained professionals, because a normal custodian wouldn't be able to, you know, handle nuclear waste safely, except for the people that they had go into the homes around the blast site to remove all the rotting food, because the like government officials believed that there would be like food like outbreaks, something with the radiation in the food, and then that would spread and it would like infect a whole bunch of other people. And all the people that they had go into these homes were specifically female janitors. I'm getting all this information from Wikipedia though, so take it with a grain of salt. I could be wrong. And yes, I did research the Chernobyl accident for this. So when I say all I think about is the show, that's not a joke. So it doesn't initially make sense for Mischa's mother to have become a part of the cleanup crew in Chernobyl unless she was part of this female, like, janitor task force. Now, whether she was like a sanitation worker at this factory and was like contracted out to do this work, or she switched professions after, I don't know. I'm inclined to believe the former. But all this information sets up a very like vivid idea of Mischa's backstory. His family was just him and his mother who he loved dearly, from the fact that he said that killing his mother was indirectly killing him. He had no father, no real money, if like your job is like basically being forced to clean up nuclear waste, because nobody like chooses to do that unless they have no other choice. And he's just coming into adulthood when he's ripped from the only life he's ever known and forced to move to Canada with adoptive parents who hate him. And I get that, like, they were scammed or whatever, but they just treat him so poorly. He's clearly going through a lot. Because not only does he like not know anybody in this new area, he assumedly doesn't even get to like be at his mother's funeral because his mother put in all the arrangements for him to be like adopted and moved to Canada while she was alive. So like he just like knows that in Ukraine his mother is just like dying and he doesn't even get to like see her or visit her or do anything because he's stuck in Canada with no money and nowhere to go. It's incredibly sad. But then, talking about this song is awesome, it's clear that he has like a connection to like rap music, probably because it's once again talking about, you know, heartache, struggle, pain, shit that he's really connecting to right now. And I think it would be easy to listen to this song as awesome and just hear it as a white man's bad interpretation of rap music. And I'm not saying it's like not, but I am saying that I think Mischa understands the idea behind rap and what it's like doing like narratively and like the way that the storytelling aspect works. I think that his view on his life is just what's wrong about it, because the song's all about, you know, like, I have all this money, I'm living this best life now, but he's rapping about things that like just sort of seem normal, like his Honda Civic, track lights in his ceiling, his 60-inch TV. It's just sort of all very normal things. Like, there are some moments when he's talking about like a Tiffany toothbrush and a Learjet, but I think that those are indicators of the life that he was brought into. I'll get to it later, but I think that his parents are actually really rich, but they obviously don't give him any money or any nice things because they hate him. Also, by the way, when I looked up Tiffany's toothbrush just to sort of like see what the general market price was for it, I could not find an actual toothbrush, but I did find this baby brush. As the parents thought that they were going to be getting a baby child, I think it's just fun coincidence. But despite like all of these things that he's rapping about just being sort of like not that flashy or actually expensive, to Mischa, who grew up with, again, like basically no money, this seems like a wild, amazing thing. He has a car. It's a Honda Civic, but it's a car. He has a 60-inch TV. Not the biggest, grandest, most wild TV in the world, but it's a TV that he can play his PlayStation on. He's able to go to McDonald's. All of his appliances are stainless steel. And like these just seem like general standard things if you grew up in sort of like Canada or the US as I have. But to Mischa, who grew up like in the Ukraine post the Chernobyl accident, all of these things seem like amazing and wild to him. That's why the song, while it does sound a bit weird and a bit lame, I think it's truly authentic to how he's feeling. Like, Mischa truly thinks that he's like a baller. He thinks he has bands on bands on bands, and that like all of these things are like a sign of some great wealth. And while I do believe that like his family is rich, I think that like the things that he's rapping about clearly like don't display that the way that he thinks they do. But speaking of money, Mischa says that he's saving up money to move back to the Ukraine and go and marry Talia. This implies that he has to be getting money from somewhere. And while I think, like I said before, that his parents are like super uber rich, I like to headcanon that they owned one of the mines in the area that is now since shut down, but they like made a lot of money from that. They have like generational wealth, but because like they hate Mischa, they don't give him like an allowance or anything. They also sort of feel like the type of people who would be like, you gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I walked 40 miles in the snow to get to school, but they also like own their own private jet. I also like to believe that Mischa's family couldn't have a child of their own. That's why they chose to adopt. It was like their last option for a child. So like when Mischa showed up and he wasn't what they had thought on paper, it just sort of cements this idea in their mind that they can't have this picturesque family no matter how much money they throw into it. And that's why his mother always weeps when she looks at him, because he's sort of just like a reflection of her failure to him, even though like fertility is obviously not a choice. I know that feels like I'm reaching, but it feels true in my heart. Just the vibes, that's 100% what I'm getting. Anyways, Mischa has to be getting this money from somewhere. So I like to believe that he works at the mall with Noel, because isn't that just adorable? Picture this. Okay, Mischa, he's in his Honda Civic. He's driving down the highway to the mall. He sees Noel like walking along the highway or like waiting for the bus, and he knows that they're going to the same place. So he's like, hey, just get in. And he drives them both to the mall. They carpool. They both hate oceans, so they have something in common to talk about. Then they start having this little routine where they like go to work together, and if they get off at different times, they like wait for the other person to get off so that they can carpool back to Uranium City. And I just think that they would become really cute friends, because I think that they have like a lot in common. Like, Mischa likes Drag Race, for God's sakes. Like, they could be best friends. Anyways, where in the mall do you think that Mischa works? I think that he works at either, like, a movie theater or one of those, like, clothing stores that sells, like, almost parodies of trendy clothing with how sort of, like, outlandish they are. And it, like, that store's gonna close in, like, a couple months. But, like, something in retail, something soul-sucking so that him and Noel have something to, like, lament about in the car ride home. But speaking of friendship, I think that Mischa is weirdly good friends with Ricky despite them never having really talked. I think since the rest of the choir are, like, childhood friends, Mischa is always sort of, like, on the outside of that. And because Ricky doesn't talk, he's also sort of like excluded from everything that like Noel, Constance, and Ocean are doing. So I think that Mischa has formed this sort of like one-sided solidarity friendship with Ricky. Because Mischa is always the one trying to like include Ricky in the conversation. Like he's the one after Noel's lament who compliments Ricky on being able to play the accordion. And he's also the one who has the line that like prompts Ricky to go into his song and his section of the show. And on top of that, Ricky is also the only one, alongside with Constance, who we will get to next, who has, like, a specific part in Mischa's song. Like, in the chorus, it's just him going back and forth with Ricky and Constance. Like, Noel and Ocean do not have their own, like, specific speaking parts in this song as awesome. They're just part of the ensemble. So I think that indicates friendship. And something that I had just realized while reading the script, I had always thought that Mischa wanted to be in the choir. You know, he's into rap is adjacent to music. A choir is pretty much the closest thing you could get to that in a rural small town at your Catholic school. But then I read the line where Ocean says, the only reason that you're in the choir is because you stole 3 boxes of communion wine. And I always thought that that line was weird because I was like, well, why would he be stealing wine for the choir? I thought maybe he was like bribing them to like join. But no, obviously he stole the wine for his cousin's birthday. His cousin was 10 years old and had to get his stomach pumped. So he obviously got in trouble. He got caught for what he did, and he had to join the choir as a punishment. Like, the choir would give him something to occupy his time with. Father Markus can watch over him, and that's why in the opening number, when they're all at the Kiwanis International Singing Competition, Mischa just looks so bored. He's on his phone, because he does not want to be there. I always thought that he, like, ended up hating it because Ocean is just, like, so unbearable, but he never wanted to join the choir in the first place. I don't know if that was obvious to anybody else, but I just got that. Now, last but not least, Constance Blackwood. I don't think that there's, like, a big mystery surrounding Constance. I think her character is pretty, like, well explained throughout the show. I think the like biggest mystery is like, why does she stay friends with Ocean when Ocean's kind of a bitch? I think that Constance has perpetual, well, she's really nice when you get to know her syndrome. And while Noel heavily disagrees, I think Ocean does do kind things like plan Constance's birthday, help Constance babysit her little brothers. Like, there are moments in which Ocean like shows her kindness and like is a good friend to Constance, which helps Constance sort of like justify the way that she's treated sometimes. I also think that because her catchphrase is literally sorry, that like Ocean said, she has some serious self-esteem issues, and she doesn't really know how to like stand up to Ocean until like the end of the show. My biggest theory for Constance is that she's actually better friends with Mischa than she is with Ocean. Like, obviously they're best friends forever. They have all this like long history, but I think she gets along better with Mischa than she does with anybody else in the choir. There's only like a few moments that point to this, but when Mischa says my song will only have profanity in the chorus, and Constance just like cracks up laughing. And then at the end of improv scenario number 76, where Constance asks the thing about helping the biker down the road make crystal meth, that 100% feels like a joke that Mischa would make and that Mischa would laugh at, which he does. And then at the end of Sugar Cloud, when Constance is like stepping down from the box, she's like, thanks guys, and she goes up to Mischa and they have like a fist bump, and it's just like such like a small moment, but I think it really indicates the fact that they have like a bigger friendship than what's like obvious in the show. Like, I think when Mischa moved to Canada, he was sat next to Constance because, you know, last names, alphabetical order, Baczynski, Blackwood, very similar. They would likely be sat next to each other, or at least close by. And Constance, nicest girl in town. I think her energy was just like really nice and warm and welcoming. And while a lot of other people would be put off by like Mischa's sort of like mean, rude, standoffish attitude, Constance is sort of like used to that, being best friends with Ocean, that I think she was like the only person sort of like warm and nice and welcoming to Mischa, and they became like pretty good friends. I think to like start out with that they were just sort of like class friends, like she would help him with notes and they would chat in class, but they weren't friends like outside of class until he had to join the choir. Then they became better friends. I also think that Constance really has this desire to be like more carefree and just sort of like live her life without worries, because I think she's sort of like an anxious person who's really like bogged down by her negative thoughts. So when she sees Mischa, who's able to just like sort of go out there and do whatever he wants, I think she was really drawn to that energy. I think that's also why like her favorite ride is the Cyclone. Like on a roller coaster, you just sort of experience this like carefree weightlessness, and I think she like really enjoys that. I also think that's why she like slept with that Carney. She wanted to just sort of do something on a whim and not have to worry about the consequences of that. And I think that's something that Mischa's able to do really easily, and I think that's why they become really good friends. It's very much a classic, like, Slytherin, Hufflepuff energy, and I think that they would just be, like, honestly very good friends. I think this also isn't helped by the fact that I believe that Constance is the oldest of her family. I think she has a very Meredith from Brave situation with 3 younger brothers. So that really, like, sort of cements this idea that she has to be, like, responsible, has to, like, set a good example for her brothers, but I don't think that she necessarily has eldest daughter syndrome, because I don't think that her parents sort of like treat her as a third parent. I think that they sort of just like understand that she's a child. I think that she also works at the Blackwood Cafe like in her spare time. Like she picks up shifts every once in a while, but she doesn't like have to have a job like Mischa and Noel, because like I think her parents have enough money to like not have to have her worry about that. She mentions pizza night being one of her favorite things, and while that seems like a simple concept, there's a lot of questions there. Like, how often is pizza night? Who's invited to pizza night? What does Constance get on her pizza? I think it's a monthly thing. I think that with all the different schedules of like working at the cafe, choir rehearsal, being a baby, that they can only really commit to once a month. I think that obviously the whole Blackwood family is invited, but I think that also the friends of any of the kids in the family are also invited. So Ocean obviously joins all the time in order to, you know, like get out of her house and eat normal food. Mischa has come a couple times, and the first time that he came, he wore like super fancy clothes, like a proper like job interview, like dress shirt and tie. And when Constance saw him, she had like a really big laugh. Because she's like, dude, it's just pizza, you have to chill. But he wanted to make a good first impression. Ricky has never come, but Constance makes sure to remind him every month that he is invited. And Noel has never come because he does not want to spend any more time with Ocean than he has to. I also think that they all vote on a movie to watch after they all eat pizza. And all of the guests are, of course, welcome to stay the night if they so choose. Ocean does every time, and Mischa has never because he doesn't even want to get close to overstaying his welcome. And I think Constance gets simple pepperoni pizza on pizza night. And she also loves Halloween, as she mentions. And I think she was planning on doing a big group Halloween costume the month after they went to the fair and died. They were going to be the Scooby-Doo gang, and it was going to be awesome. But that, everybody, are all of my thoughts and opinions and theories on the show. But that is only a fraction of the iceberg. I know that this video was like 2 hours long, but when I say all I think about is the show, all I think about is this show. We could get a full headcanon theory, like how many kids go to St. Cassian's, what was life like at St. Cassian pre and post accident, like how did the accident like shape the culture of the city, because everybody knew everybody in Uranium, so everybody must have been very impacted by these 6 children that everybody had to have known dying. Was Mischa's mother alive to hear the news of her son's death, or had she died at this point? There are so many questions still left to answer, and I'm more than happy to make another video if people request it. But definitely 100%, if you got to this end of the video, thank you. I love you. But let me know what your thoughts and opinions and theories and headcanons are of Ride the Cyclone in the comments. I'd love to talk about Ride the Cyclone. Whether or not anybody asks me, I will likely make another video about Ride the Cyclone sometime in the future, or check out my Tumblr. My Tumblr is in the description. I make all of my post about Ride the Cyclone on my Tumblr. Anytime I just have like a thought about it, I will put it on my Tumblr first. A lot of these theories are just ones that I've already put on my Tumblr. But yes, I hope you all are doing well. I hope that September 14th treated you well. Drink some water, eat some food, and don't ride any rickety roller coasters unless you're 100% certain in the melody and choreography of the song about your life.